I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, and this is Radioland, my international radio trends newsletter from radioland.email, and this podcast is sponsored by rss.com. If you'd like to get paid for making a podcast, then why not go to rss.com and check out their paid program, which enables you to get paid. That's how that works. You'll find it at rss.com. I got an Australian radio research diary the other week, and I bet you'd be interested in it. So in my blog, I've written up loads about the Australian radio diary and whether diaries like these are still the best way to measure radio listening. It was really interesting to take a peek at it, and I hope you enjoy the read. You'll find it linked from the show notes. The excellent Dan Barrett writes a newsletter called Always Be Watching, and in a recent post he argues quite well that SBS needs to be merged with the ABC from a television standpoint at least. He forgets about the existence of SBS Radio, which operates 2 analogue stations and a set of digital-only services, and I'd suggest that his central point also goes for these radio stations as well. Particularly, all of SBS's radio stations are available on DAB+ in the capital cities, on a multiplex shared with the ABC, and SBS Radio 2 has a set of FM frequencies in every capital city, including 93.3 FM in Brisbane. SBS Radio 2, as I write this, is broadcasting in Portuguese. At 1 p.m. it'll be in Spanish, at 2 p.m. Turkish, and at 3 p.m. Indonesian. It's difficult to argue that in 2026 a linear FM frequency is best used for programming which works better on demand like this. There isn't a person alive, I would argue, who would listen to SBS Radio 2 continually for the next 3 hours. And I've long argued that ABC local radio should be on FM in the capital cities. But I'm also aware that the FM spectrum is full. I would gently suggest that, ABC Radio Brisbane could be a better use of 93.3 FM than the patchwork output of SBS Radio 2. Now, of course, SBS Radio 2 should continue on linear DAB+ if it makes sense there, and certainly online as on-demand content, including podcasts. It has a job to do. I'm just not convinced that linear FM is the best tool. Dan did unlock that article about SBS from the paywall just for us, which is very kind of him, and as you'll notice, it's a good newsletter if you're vaguely interested in media. It's just $5 Australian a month. It's a bargain. You should go and buy it today, as I did last week. Bill Rogers has highlighted an issue with Google smart speakers. Apparently they're not working very well for BBC Radio streams again. Meanwhile, here in Brisbane, Hey Google, listen to ABC News Radio, or even Hey Google, listen to ABC News Radio on Radio app, gives me a radio station from Toronto in Canada, so that's not working very well either. I link to audio of the last ever CBS Radio News Bulletin, and the last time I criticised a US radio institution, I got incredibly angry email from someone who couldn't believe I thought differently to him. So I will just meekly suggest that there's way too much newsreader voice, and it's unlike how anyone speaks in real life. The point of radio is a human connection and a shared experience. I would suggest that an overly affected voice and delivery makes radio less human, personally. Now, I'm in Canada next week at the Western Canada Media Conference. It's called FWD. Forward! Broadcast Dialogue has put my name among the highly anticipated presentations, which is very nice of them. So I'm not much looking forward to the travel, but I am looking forward to seeing my Canadian friends there. In the UK, the Community Media Association has a summer gathering on June the 13th in Melton Mowbray. Speaking there is radio's own Valerie Geller, as well as Steve Wright's producer Jonathan Ruffle, as well as other speakers, and your ticket also includes a pork pie. No, really. In the US, the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act has now been added as part of the pending Surface Transportation Reauthorization legislation. That means it's likely to actually pass Congress this year. The NAB thinks this is brilliant. The CEO of the Consumer Technology Association says it's the wrong direction. The law should correctly be called AM Radio for Every Vehicle for at maximum the Next 8 Years Act, and the requirement that it can receive signals and play content transmitted by AM broadcast stations would, I'd argue, be satisfied by a free tune-in subscription, which also carries content transmitted by AM broadcast stations. Last week I mentioned the 100-year birthday of Radio Zagreb, but Croatia has an even longer history of broadcast radio, probably longer than your own country, because 116 years ago, on February the 20th, 1910, the first radio station ever went on the air with a mix of military communication and content aimed at civilians. It was called Radio Pola or Pula, depending on if you're Italian or German, and it predated KDKA and the BBC and reached up to 1,000 kilometres. One of the listeners, according to Radioland reader Gordon Antich, was the German Emperor Wilhelm II, who was in Corfu listening to trial broadcasts from the station. And finally, in the UK, good news from Global, a statement from Companies House, which I will read to you in full. Company name, Global Media and Entertainment Limited, company number 06251-684. The company confirms that its intended future activities are lawful. Well, that's a relief. Yes, this is part of UK law, specifically the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023. And if there is anyone from the UK government listening to this, when are you going to repeal this? What a total waste of time that is. It just costs companies money, and surely you don't want that. I also, in my personal blog, have written a trip report of my flight between Brisbane and London, which you won't be interested in, so I'm not quite sure why I've even mentioned it. So where am I speaking next? Well, Forward, the Western Canada Media Conference in Kelowna in BC. Then Radio Days Asia in Jakarta in Indonesia, radiodaysasia.com for tickets and stuff. I will be talking about radio's international trends and its future. And Podcast Movement in New York City, which I hope I'll be speaking at. September the 14th to the 18th is when that is, and we will see whether or not there's an opportunity for me there. And thank you to the supporters, including Clyde Broadcast, the radio people, Play It Software, Brun Audio Consulting, Radio Today in the UK, and Radio King, as well as personal supporters David Furnham, Marty from New York, Gavin Watson, Greg Strassel, Sam Phelps, Richard Hilton, Emma Gibbs, Jocelyn Abbey, and James Masterton for being regular supporters as well. If you would like to support my work in any way, then please do. You can buy me a coffee. Buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland is where to give regularly, or you can just give a one-off coffee or 5 if you like. That is all good. And you can, of course, subscribe to this at radioland.email if you would like this in your email box. I'm on Mastodon as well, on the Fediverse, james@bne.social if you're there as well. You're not? Oh. And my website has more details about who I am, what I do, and whether I can help you further. That's james.cridland.net. And until next time, keep listening.